Alrighty. All right. Ready. Just figuring some stuff out. Sorry, guys. This is uh this is the first time I've done this in a while. Not the first time I've done it, but I'm trying to get it so I can see my chat over here with y'all, but I need that to be muted so it doesn't overlap. You know what? We're just gonna do something different. All right. We're gonna get started here in a second. So I'm just gonna wait to see if some people come in. But while we're waiting, let me just introduce myself. So my name is Erica Porter. I'm actually Dr. Erica Porter. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I have been a yoga instructor for many, many years. And I want to talk about the nervous system with you guys today because I have found that having an understanding of your nervous system, how it works, and how that can really influence the way that you feel is a really powerful tool to have just at your disposal. So I think having a little education on this not only can just give you opportunities to find places find opportunities to have more energy, maybe to calm the energy down, but it also can have a huge influence over pain. So I work with a lot of chronic pain patients, and learning about the nervous system and how pain works can be a really powerful tool in helping to manage your pain. So I do have a Patreon, um, Dr. Erica Porter, and you can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Erica Porter. And I teach yoga classes and also just give little videos, tips and tricks. But I also do take virtual and in-person clientele. So if you are dealing with some chronic pain, it can be really helpful to learn these things, but also have somebody kind of figure out exactly what's going on in your body and help you to figure out what kind of movement and exercises would be helpful as well. So never hesitate to reach out to me and ask me questions. If you would like to set up a session, just send me a message either through my website, which is porterpt.com, or through Instagram or through YouTube here. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're talking about the nervous system. I'm going to do a nervous system 101, and we'll get into some deeper things further on into this session. So let's let's see. Okay, so the nervous system consists of, it's kind of, this is overall nervous system. We've got the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. So the central nervous system is talking about your brain and your spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system is all the nerves from the brain and the spinal cord as they go out into your body. So the peripheral nervous system has the autonomic and the somatic nervous system, which we'll go into more detail later. And then the autonomic nervous system has the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. You may have heard of fight or flight or rest and restore. That's where that all comes in. So we're going to break those down. So here's another visual for you, just understanding here on the left, that central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system are the nerves that come from that spine out into the body, and it's divided into somatic and autonomic. Your somatic nervous system is what controls your voluntary movement. So when I think, I'm going to touch my face, I touch my face, and I also feel the touch on my face. That's part of the somatic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is sympathetic, parasympathetic. This is involuntary movement. So autonomic or automatic, it just is happening as part of a more instinctual pattern, response to our environment and the things that we need to be happening all the time that we don't need to be thinking about all the time, like breathing or your heart rate, things like that. They're just going and working for you in the way that they're meant to work for you. So here's a little close-up of what a nerve cell looks like. So, I like to compare the nerves and the nervous system to like electricity. So these kind of run through your body and send these little electrical impulses down the line of the nerve cells. And then these little nerves will innervate or come into your muscles and your skin and give you the ability to feel that space or move that space. And then it also happens not just in your muscles and your skin, but throughout your body in your organs. That's more part of the autonomic, but this is just an example of what a nerve cell looks like. So again, that central nervous system is your brain and your spinal cord. So here's a little photo of your brain. We have all these lobes in our brain, that frontal lobe that deals with thinking and speaking and memory and movement. We've got the parietal lobe, which is your language, touch, taste, and smell. Occipital lobe here in the back, that's vision, colors, letters, left and right. Your cerebellum, which is also known as like the little brain here on the back, that helps to your balance and your coordination. On the sides here, you've got the temporal lobe. This is hearing and learning and certain feelings and fear. And then the brain stem, that's kind of heading down towards the spine. That's your breathing, your heart rate, your temperature, your blood pressure. In the brain stem is where that autonomic nervous system communicates through that brain stem. Okay, so here's just a little visual. We're not going to go through each lobe and all the details, but I just want to talk to you about these two specific areas of the brain. So this picture here in the center is you looking like from the top down at the brain, and this pink line across the center, that's going to be your motor cortex. So it says somatosensory, somatomotor. That's part of your somatic nervous system. So we said earlier, that's your voluntary movement. So the pink line is your motor. So that would be, I'm going to touch my face. I touch my face. So that goes from the brain out to the muscles to tell you what to do. And then the somatosensory cortex, which is this purple line kind of on the back. So the pink is in the frontal lobe, and then the purple is in the parietal lobe. And that has to do with your sensory cortex. So being able to sense from the outside, from your body going into your brain. So that's like feeling myself touching my face. I do that with the motor cortex to touch my face, but when I feel that, that is part of the sensory cortex. So that sends a signal to my brain that I am touching my face. And then this is just sort of showing you where you decide to move your toes, that's the part of the brain that tells you to move your toes. And over here, it's when something touches, like if you stub your toe, this is the area of the brain that's going to feel that. And it kind of starts on the inside and then it wraps all the way around. So it's wrapping around to the outside like that. And there are certain areas of the brain that have more activity connected to that space. So I just thought it would be, this is called the homunculus, or little person, little man. And this next slide is like a little silly, but I think it's interesting because it shows you, and I'm going to wait to show you because it might surprise you, but it shows you a little man, and the areas of the body that are have more energy dedicated to that, so more nerves are kind of innervating these areas, are actually bigger on this little man, and then the ones that have less are a little smaller. So it looks really kind of wild. It's kind of freaky. So you can see, look at the hands. The hands have so much activity dedicated to them. The tongue and the lips, thinking about speaking and talking and eating. So those are like big main areas that are really sensitive, and have a lot of nerves and energy dedicated to those spaces. So talking about the spinal cord. So I was talking about the brainstem right here. That's like at the bottom of the brain there. And then it moves into the spinal cord. So um, we've got your cervical spine down into your thoracic spine, down into your lumbar spine. And you can see, I kind of just want you to understand that there's the bones of the spine, but in the center, this is one of the bones, the vertebra, and there's the discs in between. But in the center of that spinal vertebra, the column, there's a little hole, and that spinal cord goes through that hole all the way down. You can see it right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Hopefully you can, but you can see the pink going right through the center of that spine. And then right around your lumbar spine, it actually kind of turns into these cords, and it's called the quada equina. So that starts at L2 and goes down. It's like a horse's tail. So those nerves are a little more, they're not as contained in the cord. So each vertebra of the spine, you can see here, over here, we've got these little holes, these foramens, where the spine or the nerves from the spinal cord come out. And then that's where they go out into your body and innervate. When I say innervate, that's when they kind of go into the muscle and send those electrical signals to the muscle. So if anyone has ever had like a bulged disc or a herniated disc, this disc can stick out or poke out and put pressure on the nerve. Very commonly, it can cause sciatica, which is a big nerve that goes down the back of the leg. And that happens when these discs can compress and push out onto that nerve. So we want space here at the foramen for those nerves to come out and innervate the body. So that's where the peripheral nervous system starts. So the spinal cord coming down from the brain is still part of the central, but these little nerves that come out of the spinal cord and into the body is the peripheral nervous system. And then just you don't need to know these. This is a complicated slide. Don't feel like you need to read all of these words on here. I just want you to understand that the spinal cord itself has these tracks that go down and up. Think of like railroad tracks going up and down that spinal cord. And so I was talking about how the motor is the part of the brain, the motor cortex on the right, that's green here, that's going up to that frontal lobe, and then it's you think in your mind, I'm gonna stand up. So the thought goes through your mind, and you go to stand up. The nerve, the signal down has to go down this track to all the areas in the body, all the muscles that you need to stand up, and that coordination and that balance. And it goes all the way down the spinal cord and then shoots the message out to the peripheral nervous system and tells you to stand up. So it starts in the brain, goes down out into the body. And then the sensory starts from the outside and goes from the body up into the brain, telling you that you're sensing something. So all those senses, it starts from the out and goes in. And these are all the names of the different tracks, and all of them kind of feel or have different jobs. So we don't need to know all the names of those different ones, but just so you understand that there are many different tracks that go up and down that help us to receive information and also to give information out. All right, so coming back to that peripheral nervous system, I'm going to take a little break for a second here to check and see if we have any questions. No, no questions. Well, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat and I will take breaks and come and check it out. But let's go back to, if I can figure it out one of these days. Hmm. Did I just exit out of it? Sorry, guys. Oh, there we go. Okay, so coming back to the peripheral nervous system, so we've got the somatic and we've got the autonomic. So the somatic is what we've been talking about, that sensory and that motor. The motor is going from the brain to the body, and then the sensory is going from the body to the brain. So if you've ever heard of somatic therapy, we'll talk about that in a second. That's where that name somatic comes from, and the word somatic means feeling. Um, Autonomic is this is the part of the nervous system and the brain stem in that back. That's kind of a center for the autonomic nervous system, and the hypothalamus. So this is what is responsible for that involuntary actions. So sympathetic fight or flight and parasympathetic rest and restore. And these are the things that I think when I talk about chronic pain or when I talk about anxiety and stress and chronic stress, this is the area of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system that we don't have direct control over it. I can't just be like, stop feeling pain and it stops. I can't just be like, stop your heart rate from speeding up and it stops. You can't just do that like voluntarily, but there are ways that you can influence it to then help that automatic part of the nervous system to shift into one or the other. And oftentimes when we talk about this, we're trying to get out of that sympathetic and into that parasympathetic. But there are times that we're drowsy and we're sleepy and we need to get up, and exercise is a intentional sympathetic nervous system activation. So it's not always bad to be in sympathetic. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. It's just kind of understanding the difference between the two and knowing that we have the ability to influence one or the other. And those moments when we sort of get held hostage by it, we feel like we have a little bit more of a sense of control of how to shift into one or the other when we need it. So when you understand it, you have a little bit more power, a little bit more control. Even though we can't like completely control the autonomic, we have ways, tricks, and tips of ways to influence it. Okay, so somatic nervous system, that's the sensory and the motor. So a sensory nerve is called an afferent nerve that goes from the skin to the brain. A motor neuron is called an efferent nerve that goes from the brain to the muscle or to the skin. I remember that because E for exit, it's coming from the brain and exiting towards the outside of the body. But this is the afferent nerves, part of the somatic nervous system. And I just wanted to put in a slide here to talk about somatic therapy. So I don't specifically have training in somatic therapy, but I do know the basics. So I'm just going to give you a little basics. Sometimes you'll hear it called bottom-up regulation. So um, like a lot of traditional behavioral health therapies will be like talk therapy. And the idea is that you process it in your mind and you work through it. So somatic therapy is doing, instead of from the top, figuring it out in your mind and then thinking that it'll come down and you'll feel it in your body. They've reversed that if you can feel it in your body first, then the mind will follow suit. So, understanding how the body can feel and express painful experiences. So one of the things I've been saying quite a bit to my clients and just in my teaching as a yoga teacher is that, sometimes I think historically in the past when we talk about the mind and the body, we've seen it as sort of two separate things. But remembering that our brain and our mind are part of our body and they are directly linked through this nervous system. We can't separate them. So there has been a lot of research to show, especially like depression and how that can actually create physical pain in the body. Um, and vice versa, physical pain can cause emotional distress and all those things. So they're so connected, and it's just, I think, in all of our best interests to start understanding how we can work with them together and create change that way. So that's what somatic therapy is all about. It's like learning how to understand how to feel things in our body, or recognize how maybe we hold on to pain or hold on to emotional trauma in our body, and address it in our body first, and then it moves up into the intellectual emotional side of things in the brain. So that's why it's called bottom up. It starts from the bottom and you move up. I did find a really good article in Harvard Women's Health Watch, and they were talking about how it's focused on the body and how emotions appear within the body. And some somatic therapies posit that your body holds and expresses experiences and emotions, and traumatic events or unresolved emotional issues can become trapped inside. Um, so as far as like specific treatment with somatic therapy, that's something that you'd have to find a somatic therapist to work with. I do think just inherently physical practices like yoga, where it's a little gentler and it's like, especially learning how to relax the body, learning how to feel safe in your own body is a really powerful tool to have. And yoga does a really good job at helping you to gain confidence in your body. And I think more of the more gentle versions of yoga, like restorative or slower flows, give you the opportunity to breathe into spaces and to get to know places in your body, because we can literally numb places out, especially if you've had like a chronic pain issue. So if you've, hurt something years ago and it's just never, you've compensated for a long, long time. We'll talk later about neuroplasticity and how that can literally numb you out in those spaces. So it is in your best interest to start to learn and feel your body in all the ways that feels safe enough, and it can really have an influence on how you feel mentally and emotionally, and your levels of pain. All right, so let's talk about the autonomic nervous system. So, sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. Parasympathetic nervous system is rest and restore. And you may have heard of freeze. So I'll talk about that in just like a small amount. But um, you've probably felt these experiences in your body, and you may or may not be able to recognize them in the moment. But I'm hoping that when we kind of discuss them a little bit more, you'll start to be able to recognize when you're in these spaces in your body. So the idea is that the parasympathetic rest and restore is where we're supposed to kind of like, that's supposed to be our baseline. That's kind of where we're supposed to be most of the time. And then the sympathetic is reserved for those high demanding moments, which isn't always bad, like I said before. So literally exercising, doing cardio gets you in your sympathetic nervous system. And that will challenge your heart, which is great because it creates a stronger heart. It makes you stronger in your muscles. It's not bad to be in the sympathetic. The problem is when we get stuck in that, or when we get into that place, and don't know how to get out of it and are trying to live our lives and make decisions. So let's talk a little bit deeper about, I was saying that freeze state. So there's a theory. This is something I'm just going to introduce to you. And this is, if you're interested in more, I left the link at the bottom, the polyvagalinstitute.org. This is from the page that's just, what is polyvagal theory? So autonomic regulation. So how the autonomic nervous system continuously organizes physiological states in response to environmental demands. So when we have the world coming at us, it's the way that we kind of navigate. Do we feel safe? Do we feel threatened? And then our response to that. So there's this hierarchy. So ANS is autonomic nervous system. So there's these three principles, that the first one is that there's this hierarchy. So PNS is that parasympathetic nervous system. We want to, a baseline, like I said, we're trying to be most of the time in that relaxed space, that rest and restore, which in this theory is called the ventral vagal response. So that's when we're just kind of chill and we're having a good time and we're feeling calm. And then the dorsal vagal response is when we do feel threatened or have, PTSD as an example. Sometimes instead of going into that sympathetic nervous system response with fight or flight, like we're ready to fight or we want to run away, sometimes it goes into the dorsal vagal response, which is a total shutdown and freeze. Um, so that's where that fight, flight, or freeze comes from. And the freeze is actually a parasympathetic, like the vagus nerve responding in like a complete shutdown. So some people, it really kind of depends on your history. And I mean, I think personality, the situation, how you decide to respond in those moments. So I've definitely had freeze moments that I can think of in my life. And then I've also had moments where when I feel threatened, I'll run away or I'll fight back. And so that's this sympathetic nervous system. So that's the three kind of responses that we might have according to this theory: ventral vagal, relax, chill, cool; dorsal vagal, freeze; or sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight. Um, and then the second principle of polyvagal theory is there's this ability of, it's called neuroception. So that is that almost like unconscious, sometimes conscious ability to be like, what's safe and what's a threat. And we're constantly always doing this in our lives. We have this ability to have this neuroception. And in times we may not even realize we're doing it. Like, I don't know if you have ever had that experience where you're just kind of feeling fine, and all of a sudden, you have that sympathetic response. And maybe there was something in your vicinity that felt threatening. And that's the response that you have. So it's this sort of idea that we're always kind of scanning our environment and checking in with our sense of safety or threat. And then this third part of it, I really love. It's called co-regulation. And I hope that you all have experienced this before, but it's this idea that other people's nervous system can regulate your nervous system. But I also put or upset yours because you may have had that experience where somebody's really having this fight or flight response, and then it makes you start to have that fight or flight response. And I think in those moments, it's great to learn that, okay, so this person is like having a moment. So if I calm my system down and if I create that parasympathetic safety in my body, it may have an influence on this person if they are in co-regulation with me. So I know I've had these experiences when I'm not having a great time and I call my friend and we talk on the phone, or I go and hang out with somebody. You can literally feel that sense of co-regulation, which can calm you down. So pretty interesting. I think that kind of stems from, when we're babies and, we need to be soothed by our parent, and that's how we can, as parents, but also as friends and family members, we have the ability to co-regulate other people's nervous systems with them. So, pretty interesting. If you want to know more about that, go ahead and head over to the polyvagalinstitute.org and learn more about that. Here's just a little graphic. So Dr. Stephen Porges is he's the one that created this polyvagal theory. So there's the relaxed parasympathetic nervous system up on top, and then there's that mobilized sympathetic nervous system response where you're fight or flight. And then we've got this immobilized, which is that dorsal vagal pathway of the parasympathetic nervous system where you just slow down or you freeze. And then it looks like there's these hybrids in between all of those. So it's not a simple, straightforward thing. It can be a little complicated, but again, it's helpful to have an understanding of these ideas and these theories, and you can, in those moments when you need it, think about, hey, how do I co-regulate? And we'll talk about other techniques to help get back into that parasympathetic nervous system. So here's a little graphic to show you the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and what those nerves. So you see at the top, the very top, the hypothalamus, that is where um, the sort of center of that autonomic nervous system is, and then it sends all these signals out to these areas, um, and has this influence over our body. So I think the sympathetic nervous system, one of the things that, we've all probably felt is increased heart rate. That is definitely something that happens when we get in that fight or flight. The pupils dilate. The airways relax, they get a little bit wider so that we can get air faster. Oftentimes, in that fight or flight, we're taking more short, shallow breaths. We're just trying to get as much oxygen and carbon dioxide out as we can fast. It's not sustainable over time, but in that moment, it's useful. Um, and then one of the things here you see it inhibits digestion. So there has been a lot of research to support the fact that chronic stress can it can create digestive issues. So through your colon here and your small intestines, there's these little muscle contractions that help to move everything along to exit the body. And so when we're in that sympathetic nervous system response, those little muscle motility is what it's called, of the muscle contractions of the nervous system just shut down. So they're not moving along as well. And even that bile secretion and the enzymes are decreased, insulin. So you can see how long-term sympathetic nervous system response, chronic sympathetic nervous system response can affect how well your organs work. So when we talk about the parasympathetic, we've got a slower heart rate. The airways, when it says constrict, they just sort of go back to neutral, I would say. They would be opening up for the sympathetic. And then all of these digestive and organs are increasing in their motility and secretion. Enzyme is released, and all of the things down the line. You can read all of those. I think another thing, the adrenal glands above the kidneys, when you're in that sympathetic response, it's releasing more adrenaline, which you may have heard of, and cortisol. So those are some of the chemicals in our body that are released when we're in that stress state. And that kind of gives us, again, it's this temporary short-term release of energy to help us out in those moments. But that it's not sustainable over the long term. We have to learn how to bring it back down into the parasympathetic in those in-between moments, so we're not overloading our body with those chemicals. And we have the moments to be able to like balance it and create more of an equilibrium and balance it back out. So the parasympathetic nervous system is controlled mostly by the vagus nerve. It's huge. Do you see that? It goes to all of these things. And the sympathetic, we have so many more. So the vagus nerve, it can be a really powerful nerve to learn how to utilize because it can help us get more into that sympathetic nervous system. So again, I was talking about the sympathetic nervous system, and when we hear the word stress, I think oftentimes we think of that's bad, and it's not bad to have some stress in our lives. This is the life, the body that we're given, and we're supposed to be able to do hard things. So there's a normal amount of stress, and stress on the body can create more resilience. So when you are lifting weights, you're intentionally putting stress on your muscles and on your joints, which increase the strength of your muscles and increase the stability of your joints. When we put stress on our heart by doing cardio, that's going to build that muscle up and create a bigger, stronger heart. We need that, and that's really healthy for us. When we're dancing, when we're playing, when we're high energy and we're having a good time, we want to be able to get into those places, and that will create strength. The problem is chronic stress. So when we do those things, when we build that strength and have those moments of stress, higher stress from exercise or from just the demands on life that are normal, we have to then also be able to couple that with the parasympathetic nervous response. We have to give ourselves time to take breaks, to breathe, to de-stress so that everything, all the chemicals in our body can then come back into that more equilibrium. And if we're not doing that and we're just continuing to put more and more and more and we're not sleeping well and we have all these demands, which it's very, very hard in this world not to get into that space, um, because there are so many demands on us and we do have this pressure to always be achieving and to be doing. And I think socially, there's this pressure on us to always be doing and going. And if we don't, we feel guilty. But I'm telling you that if you don't let yourself have those times to then come back to that parasympathetic and let the system calm, it turns into chronic stress. So over the course of time, that can affect the chemicals and the hormones in your body because persistently over time, you've had more and more and more in your body, and your body gets desensitized to that. And it's like, well, we gotta pump more, we gotta pump more, we gotta pump more. Ah! And then you just have so much flushing through the body that it can start to cause health issues, thyroid issues, heart issues. So it is really important to understand what chronic stress is and how that can, over time, cause issues in the body. So this is persistent stress stimuli. And sometimes it can happen because of one just big traumatic event. And I think more commonly it happens long term over time. We're just in this high level of stress, high level of stress, high level of stress. And so this is called the sympathetic nervous system overdrive response. We have more adrenaline and cortisol releasing through the body. And again, your body becomes desensitized to that. And so it takes more and more to have the effect that it's supposed to have over your body. And it's just your body's not responding to it as well. This can cause inflammation in the body. Inflammation in the body is more fluid, sort of cushioning you through your body, which can cause pain, especially at your joints. You have more inflammation in your joints, and it's like causing just that pressure and that pain. Here's a little graphic about the sympathetic overdrive. So we kind of went through all of the ganglia from that sympathetic nervous system, all the nerves that come out and affect all these different areas of the body. And so when these things are on long term and we're not giving them time to go into the parasympathetic over here on the right, these are all the things that can start to happen to your body when it's in that overdrive and we haven't had time to let everything regulate again. So I'm not going to read through all of them on the right here, but maybe just take a second to kind of read through them and see if any of that sounds familiar. Digestive issues, um, tachycardia is a high heart rate. Sometimes you can even have irregular heart rate. It can cause sexual issues, depression, poor sleep, all kinds of things. All right, we're going to move on. Take a screenshot if you want. All right, let's talk a little bit deeper about the parasympathetic nervous system. So the vagus nerve, ooh, maybe you've heard of this. This is definitely a hot topic nowadays, which is great, because this is the biggest nerve in the body, and it has the most influence over the parasympathetic nervous system. So some people talk about vagal tone. So we want to have good vagal tone because that means that the vagus nerve is functioning well. And this is measured by your heart rate variability. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but we want to have variability between the beats. And a higher heart rate variability means better vagal tone. They do, I know on iPhones and your watch, they do track your heart rate variability, but for personally, and I've had some conversations with people, it doesn't track it super well. There are other ways other than our phone or our watch to track that. That is better. So you might want to look into that if that's something you're curious about. But I do know that it's not super accurate right now with our watch. But something that you can do on your own if you do a little research on that. And then again, I think that one of the things that I think that is the most interesting about the parasympathetic is that it increases your digestion, that motility, so those little contractions that move through your digestive system to get everything moving. So if you have digestive issues, which is super, super common, it could be chronic stress. Not sleeping well enough or consistently. If we have an irregular sleep schedule, that can throw things off. Yes, of course, what you're eating it does matter for sure. But understanding that part of it is your stress levels, and that really because of the vagus nerve innervating, going down into the digestive system and being responsible for those little contractions, if you're not using the vagus nerve well, or if you don't have high vagal tone because you're in more chronic states of stress, it will affect your digestive system. Um, Decreased heart rate. So the vagus nerve does go into the heart. And so when your heart rate goes up, it sends a signal that, oh, or sympathetic response. But if your heart rate slows down, it sends the signal that, okay, heart rate's slowing down. Now we're going to have that parasympathetic response. I put in here just as a yoga teacher, inversions help slow the heart rate down. So anytime your head is below your heart, that does slow your heart rate down a little bit because gravity. So, yes, your blood pumps through your body on a pump through your heart, but when you go upside down, there's this reaction in the body to slow things down for a second so that it can adjust to that different pull and gravity, and that's one of those little tricks that helps you. So that's why if you've ever had anyone tell you if you have a panic attack to put your head in between your knees, because that's going to slow your heart rate down. And then also decreased breath rate, so respiratory rate. So this is one of the big, big things. When we slow down our breath, that slows down our heart rate. So your lungs and your heart directly work together. So as you inhale oxygen in, the oxygen gets down into your lungs and then down into these little alveoli sacs, and then there's this exchange, and there's little like blood vessels that come into your lungs, and there's this exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. So the oxygen then goes into that blood. Oxygenated blood goes down into your heart, and then it's going to go through the chambers and then get pushed out into your body. And we have this oxygen that gets through our body into our cells, and oxygen along with glucose, which is what we're eating, is what creates ATP, which is energy for the body. So literally as you inhale, that oxygen is going to get into your blood system, give you that oxygen for the ATP. It's going to scrape out carbon dioxide, and it's going to come back into your heart, back into your lungs, and there's that little exchange, and then you exhale carbon dioxide. So the way that the heart and the lungs work together, they directly influence each other. So slower, longer breaths means slower heart rate. Shorter, shallower breaths means quicker heart rate. So the respiratory system, your breath, is so unique because it is part of your autonomic nervous system. We don't have to think about breathing all the time, and thank God we don't. We're just breathing all the time. But we do have the ability to control our breath. So that's part of the diaphragm. So your diaphragm is a muscle. It's part of that somatic nervous system that we talked about. So it sits like a dome underneath your lungs here. And when you inhale, it presses down. When you exhale, it comes back up. So because that diaphragm is a muscle, part of the somatic nervous system, we have the ability to control it. But the lungs are just going to keep breathing no matter what. So it's also autonomic. So involuntary and voluntary. So the thing that is, I think, the most powerful tool at our disposal all the time is that we can control our breath. If we slow our breath down by using the diaphragm to breathe, so that is the primary muscle of respiration. We use a little bit of these muscles here, but these are secondary muscles. These are called the accessory muscles in breathing. The diaphragm is supposed to be the main event. And so when we slow down our breath using our diaphragm, we then will slow down our heart rate. So like I said earlier, you can't be like, slow down heart rate, and it slows down. You just can't tell it to slow down. But if you breathe 10 to 15 rounds of diaphragmatic breathing, your heart rate will slow down. If you get that long, steady inhale, long, slow exhale, your heart rate will slow down. And when the heart rate slows down, it sends the signal to your brain, to that brain stem in the hypothalamus, and it's like, okay, we're safe. And we can do that parasympathetic nervous system response in the body. The muscles relax a little more. You feel a little safer. Your digestive system works better. The adrenaline and cortisol levels will drop. You're not going to be sweating as much. So this is probably one of the most powerful tools that I think I can teach you is that breathing using your diaphragm will help you to slow the heart rate down and indirectly control that nervous system response. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about pain. We've got about 12 minutes till the end of the hour. This is good timing. I'm just going to see if we've got any questions. Let me see if I can pull up on my phone so I don't have to do that weird thing through the app. Oh. All right, so we're going to talk about pain. This is a very complicated subject, so we're just going to scratch the surface. If you guys have any more questions about this or you want to schedule a one-on-one with me, I'm so happy to dive a little deeper into this. But I just want to introduce it to you so that you can start to think about it. This is like planting a seed. Pain is really subjective, meaning that everyone's experience to pain can be drastically different depending on your history, depending on your nervous system. Some people have more sensitive nervous systems, whether they're born that way or maybe there's circumstances in their life, chronic pain, chronic conditions, trauma, things like that, that can condition you to having a high sensitivity in that nervous system. So, this is very, very subjective, and I'm speaking in very general terms because it's going to be really different person to person. I can't give the answer. There's not one answer. You have to, this is something that you have to explore and have conversations about and figure out how it manifests for you in your body, in your brain. And again, I'm here to talk about it with you anytime you need. First, I want to talk about gate control theory. So this is a theory about ways that we can manage our pain. So I don't expect you to know all these different terms here in the photo, but just having an understanding that there are nerves, sensory nerves, so they go from the skin to our brain. And there's a couple different ones. So one of them feels pain. And when we have, like in this example, it's like that hammer is hitting the thumb. So when that hammer hits the thumb, um, the the fibers, the green one, goes into that spinal cord. So from the peripheral nerve all the way to your spinal cord, where it comes from. So where that part of the body is felt in this, and then up into the spinal cord, and then it goes up into the brain. And remember that homunculus, wherever the fingers were on that homunculus, is where your brain then senses, ow, that hurt. So the gate control theory is that this other nerve, the purple one, the DCML here. Oh, I just made fireworks. I give you guys a thumbs up. So that purple one, this is they call this a nerve that can feel mechanical stimuli. So this one has more myelin sheaths. I don't know if you guys remember from one of the first few slides, we saw the nerve, and along that center part of the nerve, there are these little, they look like little kind of cuffs throughout, and they're called myelin sheaths, and it like insulates the length of the nerve. And so it also helps to speed up how quickly that signal, that electricity can run through the nerve. So more myelin sheaths means that it can go quicker to the brain. So this DCML, that purple nerve, has more myelin sheaths on it. So it is actually something that travels faster to the spinal cord, to the brain. And what that nerve feels is mechanical stimuli. So touch, stretch, massage, Yeah, so in this, I said light touch, but I meant deep touch in that one, I think. So if you've ever had the experience where stubbing your toe is a very common one, and you grab the toe and you hold on to it and you press and you're like, that deep pressure will actually make its way to your spinal cord and you perceive it in your brain faster than the pain. So, and it then blocks the pain signal to the brain. So something like massage, stretching, um, that can temporarily, that's the key here, reduce the pain perception in our brain because that nerve travels faster to the spinal cord. So, somebody who is in chronic pain, having regular massages, going to yoga, and doing the stretching can be a really amazing way to help you manage pain. If you're in pain a lot, this is going to help you in those moments where you're just like, I just don't want to be in pain anymore. It will help reduce that perception of your brain's feeling the pain in your body. And long term, that can help create some better neuropathways so that you understand that movement is safe and things can eventually over time get better, but also needs to be paired with strength exercises or just gentle movement exercises. But this gate control theory is this idea that there's a gate that controls how we perceive the pain in our brain. So, utilizing deep touch, massage, and stretching as a way to manage your pain can be a really powerful tool to have. And just having that understanding that it is temporary. And so if we're thinking about longevity and long-term success, we also need to create some different movement patterns and strength in our body and coupling it with that as you start to move through um, getting better. So that's the gate control theory. I want to talk about just briefly. So pain neuroeducation is really awesome. This is something I use all the time in my physical therapy. Every single one of my patients gets this series of videos to watch about it. So just so you know, chronic pain is pain that has lasted longer than 3 months. So if you've had pain in your body that's lasted longer than 3 months, you are technically in chronic pain. Many people have had pain for years. And when we have that, so if you think about the way I'm talking about how we're feeling and receiving, sensory information in our brain, when we have pain for that long, sometimes people also call it persistent pain, chronic pain, persistent pain. That means that for that long, you've been getting that signal to the brain that this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this is my pain, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts. So then you develop this neural pathway from that pain point to the spinal cord to the brain. And you just keep that going over and over and over and over and over for 3 months. Even if the tissue itself, so maybe we had an original injury, even if that tissue heals, sometimes and a lot of times that pain signal persists. So understanding that pain does not always equal tissue damage. Sometimes we do have movement patterns that keep re-irritating things. It doesn't always mean it's this severe injury, but the way that we are perceiving the pain, the way that we're feeling that pain through that nervous system response can be heightened because it's been going on for so long. And also just depending on how you perceive pain and how in your experiences in life can affect the way that we perceive pain. So pain neuroeducation is educating you on how the neurobiological and neurophysiological processes happen in the body, especially in chronic pain. There has been research to show that just having this understanding coupled with new movement patterns and exercise can have a significant influence on chronic pain. So I know a lot of people in chronic pain who've been to PT, who've been to chiropractors, who've just not been able to get out of pain. And often the missing element is this pain neuroscience education and understanding in those moments when you feel pain, how to manage that. So this is where that breath work and stimulating the vagus nerve. So we didn't talk about the vagus nerve kind of runs through your ear canal and back behind it. So doing like a pull down on your ear canal or rubbing behind your ear, pulling your earlobes is a way to stimulate the vagus nerve. It also innervates your vocal cords, so humming or singing can cause that parasympathetic response. The breath work that we talked about, head below the heart. These are all little tricks. There's also tricks with your eyes. You can look down and to the left, down and to the right. These are ways to help stimulate the vagus nerve. And so in those moments, this is what I tell my patients all the time is in those moments when you feel that pain response, taking it as an opportunity to regulate your nervous system and not catastrophize, which is really easy to do, and sit back and take that breath and start to retrain that nervous system, start to retrain that neural pathway and see if you can start to rewrite that. Um, so point two here is hurt does not equal harm. Um, we want to, as if you go to a clinician, if you talk to somebody, we want to make sure that we're excluding red flags, but pain during movement does not always mean tissue damage. Sometimes it does. And I think sometimes people get a little bit frustrated when they hear things like this because historically in our Western medicine, we have said, oh, it's in your head. There's no tissue damage. It's your brain and those nerves are all connected to your body. So even if we don't have a strained muscle, but you're feeling pain, that nerve is part of your body. So you are feeling pain. And there is something going on physically with your nervous system. And maybe, again, like I said, if we've got something out of balance in our body, it just could be continually irritating tissue, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've like done some serious damage. Not always. Sometimes it does, but that's why you need to talk to a professional. And one of the things that can happen is it's this idea of central sensitization. So the nervous system can be hypersensitive, producing a pain response to normal inputs, producing pain in response to normal inputs. So one of the things I like to compare this to is like if you ever have one of those Ring cameras on your front door and you can change the sensitivity level. So if the sensitivity is really high, there may be like a leaf that blows by and you get the alert. So that's kind of what can happen with that central sensitization is that we get more sensitive. So even the smallest little bump or you turn a little weird or one of the things that happened to me with my chronic neck pain many years ago is I stepped off of a rock weird and I was like, oh, and then I couldn't turn my head for 4 days. So it can just become hypersensitive to smaller things. So you may feel the same level of pain that you felt when you actually did damage yourself, but it took way less for that to happen. And that is a nervous system adaptation. So that's called central sensitization. Um, and then here at the bottom, I just talk about how pain neuroeducation, sometimes you'll see it as PNE, is shown to positively influence self-reported pain, disability, fear avoidance, pain catastrophizing movement, and healthcare utilization in patients with chronic pain. So this is shown to help a lot of people in chronic pain having the understanding about this and knowing what to do in those moments of pain and slowly over the course of time retraining the nervous system. And this is where neuroplasticity becomes important because you have to understand those neural pathways and how you can retrain it over time. So remembering that chronic pain is not something that happened overnight. It's 3 months or longer. And I've met many people who for years and years have felt this. So it is a process that does take longer. And it can be ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. So this is why working with a professional, working with I work with patients all the time with chronic pain, and having that ability to have the patience that is required, and understanding that over the course of time you make progress. It's not something that can happen overnight. It's a commitment to treatment. So I want to talk about neuroplasticity here at the end. I just want to show a little video to help you understand how neuroplasticity works so you can understand that idea. I was talking about that neuro pathway gets created and your body wants to go to path of least resistance. So it's going to use that pathway that you've used many, many times and how we can retrain to use a different pathway. So here's a little video. Let's watch it.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well traveled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep traveling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
All right. Here's my references. All right, that's all I got for you. I am going to put my website and my Patreon. I teach Patreon yoga classes in the description of this video. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I hope this was helpful in your journey, and I hope to connect with you. So let me know, and hopefully we can continue